All right. It's a great day to be together to worship our God and encourage each other. And the thoughts I want to share with you this morning come from Colossians chapter 4. And as I kind of talked about during our communion service, part of uh, the struggle of being apart and this quarantine and everything is just not being able to be together, um, and not being able to worship together and physically be together. And As I was thinking about that and thinking about some of what I read earlier, um, I came across Colossians chapter 4, and it kind of helps us understand what we do, what we can do, and what we need to do. Um, Even when we're apart, we can participate in these things, and they might be things that you've kind of uh, overlooked, or maybe not not really thought about in the ways we should, or maybe as much as we should. But I want us to begin in chapter 4, verse 2. Paul writes, "Devote yourselves to prayer. Stay alert in it with thanksgiving. At the same time, pray also for us that God may open a door to us for the message, to speak the mystery of the Messiah, for which I am in prison, so that I may reveal it as I am required to speak. Act wisely toward outsiders, making the most of the time. Your speech should always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you should answer each person." And this is just a short snippet from Paul, but I think as we look at what he mentions and what he talks about, I think there are things that we can, um, or we need to make sure we implement um, today and every day. But particularly while we're apart, we thought, well, what can we do? How can we um, encourage each other? How can we strengthen each other? And I was in a preachers meeting a while back, and one of the questions another preacher asked was, well, how do we evangelize in these times of isolation? And so what Paul writes here: devote yourselves to prayer. uh, and maybe since the world around us has kind of quieted down a little bit, maybe we've had the opportunity to pray more, and maybe we've been able to take advantage of that. Um, but one of the things I think maybe we didn't take advantage. I'll speak for myself. What I didn't always take advantage of is devoting yourself to prayer and stay alert in it with thanksgiving. And I think when everything seems to kind of be fraying and kind of chaotic, we don't always give thanks the way we should. I don't always give thanks the way I should. And so let's devote ourselves to prayer, um, and not just prayer asking God for things, or, you know, but uh, pray with thanksgiving, giving thanks for all that we have, and counting the blessings that He's given us. Um, but He says, don't just pray, and don't just pray with thanksgiving, don't just give thanks, but He says at the same time, pray also for us that God may open a door to us for the message, uh, to speak the mystery of the Messiah. And I think we need to pray for those opportunities. As I mentioned in our preachers meeting, we discussed a little bit how does evangelism work when you can't meet people, personally. Um, how do you evangelize in these types of situations, in this environment? Um, but God can open doors. And so if we just pray that God opens doors for the message, opens opportunities for us to speak the mystery of the Messiah, I think that will help us evangelize, help us just recognize those opportunities around us. And Paul writes that he was in prison, but he says, he uses the word in the English Standard Version, the word is required to speak. Some might say compelled, but knowing the mystery of the Messiah, it should be something that we are compelled to speak and share. And even in times such as the last 3 months, our eyes can be open to the opportunities that exist, and take advantage of those opportunities. Verse 5, I think, kind of is a warning for us. He says, "Act wisely toward outsiders, making the most of the time. Your speech should always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you should answer each person." We have a time. We are in a moment of time that provides us with opportunity. Yes, we're isolated, but a lot of the world has slowed down, and it's kind of starting to creep back into starting up again in most areas. But we've got opportunity to share. Let's make the most of this time that we can, and share that mystery of the Messiah, as Paul writes. But he says, your speech should always be gracious and seasoned with salt, and know how you should answer each person. And I think sometimes that's a difficult thing for us, because, and particularly, it seems like on social media platforms, it's easy to say something that maybe you wouldn't say in person to somebody, or it's even easy to say something and be misunderstood because it's typed, and you can't see facial expressions, and you can't hear intonations and things. And so I think it's wise for us to take a minute before we share thoughts with anybody, and just make sure our words are seasoned with salt and are gracious, and that we answer each person in a way that will, again, share that mystery of the Messiah, that will share that hope that we have with those that need to hear it. And so, those are just the thoughts I had this morning. Quick snippet from Colossians 4. But Paul encourages, again, devote yourself to prayer. Not just prayer and asking God for things, but prayer that gives thanksgiving to God. And not just prayer and not just thanksgiving, but prayer that God opens doors for us to be able to share his message with others. And then having the wisdom to share that mystery in a way that will be gracious and seasoned with salt, and will be the right thing that is said to each person. And so I encourage us to do that and think about those things as we look for those opportunities to share that message with those that need to hear it.